Board members, welcome to this special board meeting as we sit down with our finalists in the superintendent selection, this process. We want to call the meeting to order at this time. We want to thank with joining us here today, I believe, Security Davon Booth and Security Ricky Dalton. In case of an emergency, use the 2 west boardroom doors to access the hallway, and then use the north or south doors to exit the building. Let's begin with a roll call vote. We will start with Vice Chair Wood.
Yes.
Member Reel. Here. Member Lear. Here. Member Carey. Here. Member Kelly. I am here. Member Hall. Here. Member Green. Here. Member Earl. Here. Member Davis. Here. Member Brenton. Here. Member Booth.
Here.
Member Bollinger.
Here.
Member Bogus.
Here.
Okay. We are going to, let me just go over a couple things here. You have the agenda. It's in backup. I emailed board members a kind of a process overview here. We want to make sure interviews will last no more than 90 minutes each. We're hoping to conclude all interviews, including this beginning portion, and a 10-minute break in between the interviews. We hope to conclude by 5:45 p.m., following which an executive session will be held immediately. And we will break while they're setting that up, and we'll determine the amount of time at that point. So if members feel like they need 10 or 15 or whatever, we'll discuss that. Before we jump into executive session, all interviews, executive session, deliberation, and the public vote are scheduled to conclude by 7:30 p.m. So with that, we will move straight into the interview process. I know you were emailed, but it was late last night, and my apologies. So let me set this up for the questioning protocol. Each board member may ask one question at a time during the interview. Each member may ask one follow-up question only if needed for clarity. Questions should be succinct and professional to maximize time. And after each board member has either asked one question or declined to do so, the chair will open the floor for additional questions and will call on board members in the order in which requests are made. We will begin questions with the board member to the left of the chair and proceed clockwise. So in this interview, we will begin with Vice Chair Wood and go around the room this way. On the second interview, we will begin with Member Green and go around counterclockwise. Okay. We ready? Let's first, before we jump into questions, Dr. Molly Hart is with us. We want to give you, we're going to start this by asking you to share. Obviously, this is an open meeting, public record, and go ahead and introduce yourself to the public and to the board. And following that, we will open it. We will begin questions. Dr. Hart.
Good afternoon. I am so pleased to be here. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the opportunities that you've afforded me. Would you like an introduction, or do you feel like that was covered yesterday?
This is to the general public. I would invite you to do whatever you feel is best, as this is your time. But as you are speaking to the public who was not necessarily at the event, you might consider.
How much time?
As long as you take.
Oh, okay. All right. 90 minutes.
Please leave time for questions.
Excellent.
Yeah, leave time for questions.
That will leave time for questions. Okay. My name is Dr. Molly Hart. I have been a lifelong educator. I started out my career, I'm originally from Michigan. I graduated from Michigan State University. I wanted to be a teacher, but I couldn't because I had to pay my way through school. I'm a first-generation college student, so I majored in family consumer science, a social work degree. I went to work as a social worker and immediately started working on my teaching certificate at night. I taught in elementary and in middle school, and then ended up in a grow your own administrator preparation program. After that, I served as a administrator, assistant principal, and principal in elementary school, middle school, high school, and also taught at the post-secondary level. I taught in the reading endorsement program to graduate students that wanted their reading endorsement. I then moved to Utah. I've been here for 2 decades. We didn't think we were going to be here that long, but we absolutely loved it, and we wanted our kids to stay in the education system here in Utah. And I love it too. I love it because it's small government, and I love the opportunity and the opportunities that when Utah comes together to get something done, it's pretty amazing. An example of that is digital learning, starting with the former Becky Lockhart, former legislator, and the initiatives that ended up to be the DTL program. When Utah puts their mind to something, they get it done. And I like being a part of that. I was principal at Mount Jordan Middle School in Canyon School District, where we completely reimagined what the middle school experience looked like. We tore down the 50-year-old industrial-looking building, and we put up a completely different learning environment for students, complete with one-to-one technology. It was the first school in the district to do so, and the AVID program. I then moved to Albion Middle School, where we moved that school to the top in the state for academic achievement. 2.5 years ago, I jumped over to the charter world, and I lead Summit Academy Charter Schools, where we educate 2,700 students, K through 12 in the south end of the valley, the Bluffdale and Draper area. I absolutely love education. I love every bit of it. For the past 4.5 years, I've served on the State Board of Education, where I've studied the state education agency and developed relationships with legislators, developed relationships with community partners, and was a member of the Finance Committee and a member of Law and Licensing, as well as chair of the Audit Committee. I'm excited about this opportunity. I think there's a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of places we can go. I'm ready to serve the board, ready to open doors of opportunity for all Utah's children.
Thank you. Vice Chair Wood.
Well, as you know, Dr. Hart, your primary role is technically a CEO of nearly 400 employees. Could you please share an example how you've positively recognized an employee and how you've dealt with an employee who may not be fulfilling their responsibilities?
Absolutely. It all starts with clear expectations. You can't determine who's doing great, nor can you determine who's not meeting expectations if those expectations haven't been clarified and communicated. Employee recognition comes in many forms. Some people don't like the rah-rah acknowledgement. Some people do. What matters is that employees get feedback on their performance, and it's genuine, and it's helpful, and it's consistent. And that matters to employees, especially your high performers. The people that you think don't need the feedback or want the feedback are the very ones that absolutely love it. It can be a sticky note, it can be a conversation, it can be a lunch, it can be a free parking spot for a month, it can be just a job well done. But we've all kept those thank you notes and those appreciation from various people we've worked with. That's how you recognize. You recognize early, often, consistently, and genuinely. On the other side, you've got employees that sometimes are not measuring up for whatever reason. The first thing you do is you make sure that they've been provided the resources so that they could could do the job that you've asked them to do. If poor performance still exists, you talk to them about why, you outline a plan, you reiterate the expectations, and you keep those. Unfortunately, in order to have a system that works in such a high-stakes arena like education, where we're educating other people's children, you cannot afford to let poor performance slide. The minute you let it go, you've lowered expectations, and you're not heading for excellence. You've taken a left turn.
Oh, did I? There we go. Thank you. Parents have the option of traditional schools, traditional public schools, charter schools, home schools, private schools, online schools, and other educational opportunities. As a superintendent, what do you see as the role of superintendent for parents and students in helping them choose the option for their student?
You make sure the options are known. You make sure that the information is shared far and wide with community partners and on your website and other means of communication. It doesn't matter to me if a student, what situation they've chosen out of any of the versions you've described, or any hybrid, a combination of those. They're still children of Utah. They are still Utah students. And what people also forget is that students come and go from our systems, and they enter one version and switch to another and switch back. We need to be providing resources for any parent who wants resources on any of the variations. It's about transparency. It's about making it easy for families to get the information and also pursue whatever it is. I have absolutely zero problems. And during the pandemic, my school provided materials for homeschool students. I have zero problems making sure that if we have resources, that we make them available to whoever wishes them. Now, there are some people who wish to not engage with the public school system. That is completely within their familial right, and I have zero problems with that. However, if they want materials and we have the materials, I believe it's in the interest of all Utah that we provide those resources.
Thank you, sir. You're my hero. Thank you. Utah has enthusiastically adopted the Prussian model of education, which has been vocally and overtly rejected by the voters of this state. So my question is, what are the steps you will take to excise the elements of this model and return us to a system based on American ideals, excellent merit, and tenacity?
High standards matter. It's extremely important that we have high expectations for our students. We also, referring back to Member Kelly's question, education is a choice. We have choices, and they are individual family choices, how they choose to educate their children. And what we need to offer in our public education system are plenty of opportunities, plenty of options, and those options need to be of extremely high quality. How a community decides to position their individual public education options is up to the LEA. They get to decide. The way we have it structured, the way it's structured in Utah, our local education agencies have the autonomy to structure their curriculum the way they wish. But we set the standards, and those standards need to remain extremely high.
Dr. Hart, as Utah's primary leader of learning, what steps would you take to encourage, invigorate, support, and promote rigor and excellence in classroom teaching?
Yes. When teachers get a chance to work together in their professional learning communities or in their groups, whatever you want to call them, they need to know what they're working towards. And it's that high expectation, they're the high standards, they are looking for evidence of mastery of skills. And as long as I talk about an individual-centric approach to education, where we're looking at the experience that the individual student gets, and that's what allows for rigor. If you're creating a system for 670,000 students, that's almost a blob. It's almost you can't meet anyone's needs. But if you take the approach, and if we lead our state agency in a way that is individual-centric, and we stay laser focused on the experience that the student has in the classroom with the teacher, with parent input, with community, the LEA input, if we make sure we stay focused on that individual experience, then we challenge each student to meet high standards. Because we haven't watered it down to an average, to a middle, to the group think, but we're able to be more precise in what we're expecting out of students individually. So my answer to that is the state board sets the standards. We set the standards high. We set the expectations high for both our adults and our children within in our system. And then we unleash the school level, the LEA level, the charter level, the classroom level to work in this individual-centric type approach, and that automatically keeps the rigor high. The other thing is keeping that spirit of innovation and constantly assessing whether we've got something that's good or something that's great in terms of outcomes, in terms of creating the outcomes that we're looking for. So it's that constant reevaluation of what we're doing, having a continuous improvement cycle, having a willingness to examine our methods and how we're approaching a problem, being able to say, nope, this isn't working exactly the way we need it to work, and pushing forward to that excellence. When you're leading an SEA, you have to set that example. So that example needs to be set for not just, the expectation is set not just for students, but also for our agency as well.
Hi, Dr. Hart. Do you perceive USBE as having moved the needle academically in Utah? If so, what worked? If not, what would you change?
We move the needle in a lot of different ways. But that's a question that's kind of the same as beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You could ask that question to 100 different stakeholders and get 100 different answers. But I will say yes, we have in some areas. And in some areas, we need to take a really close look in partnership with our other policymakers. One example of moving the dial is what we're seeing coming out of the research on our early learning, reading, early literacy. Some of the youngest students are seeing the greatest gains in our reading achievement and our I don't want to use jargon, but in our youngest students' reading scores are showing some great growth. In another area, though, I'm concerned about math. I am concerned about our math achievement, and I think we need to really look at how and we've got standards coming, so that'll be a great opportunity to really take a good look at that. I think we need to not let up. We need to be careful that we don't let up in one area and think that we're ever done. I get concerned that just because we've implemented some of the early reading and the strategies and the change management initiatives around reading, that we take our eye off the ball and start looking maybe in the direction of math. That's something that would concern me, and leading the USBE, I would want to make sure that there's continuous improvement in all those areas. I just worry that when we say, oh, we've moved the needle, that there's this, we're done, and we're never, ever done. And that would be one of my major focuses, to make sure that it's always a dashboard, and that just because we've made some progress, we're not there yet.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hart. My question is around, I just want to tell me what the day-to-day looks like with staff engagement. And part of the reason why I'm asking this is to make sure we've got consistency throughout the system when we have entities calling in, asking for information, that we're not getting different answers. So tell me about the consistency. What does the day-to-day look like? What happens every day? Not the broad overreach, but the on the ground taking place.
For me or for staff?
For you in relationship to staff.
Okay. One of the things that I like when I lead a staff or lead a group of people, I like to make sure those expectations are very clear, what everybody's role is and what the deliverable, so to speak, is, what their role is, what their responsibility is. I have a lot of report outs with my staff. I have standing meetings with regular intervals for staff, and they bring to me what it is that their progress, what they're working on. I then have group meetings where several of those individuals would interface. It's like a matrix. So I'll meet with a series of people who lead departments or what have you, and then they have their meeting. But then when they meet with me, they report out what the progress of their teams are. So when you have a regular cadence of check-ins regularly, you have fewer silos. You have fewer places where people are just off on their own, working independently. One thing that really matters is communication within the agency about who has authority over what piece, so that you don't have people in every department answering the same question to different people. The people are going to the same place for that answer. So an example would be digital teaching and learning. People need to know that these are the people that answer the questions about digital teaching and learning. And the people over here need to know if a question comes in about digital teaching and learning, it goes here. It's not helpful to have, it may seem helpful, but when other people are answering the questions, it's not a consistent message. So you make sure that you have clear team leads, clear lines of communication. You make sure that in this day and age, people go to your website to I'm going to look up digital teaching and learning. And what needs to pop up is the contact person. And then other people need to have the clarity and understanding that if they get a question, for whatever reason, that it gets shifted to who has the actual authority to answer that question. And that is a real issue. As a practitioner, you have to, as a person in the field, as an LEA, it is tricky to figure out who to call and when. And that's a primary goal for me, to clarify that information, both by clarifying what's on the website, by clarifying communication to the field, and by setting expectations that are very clear within the agency on where questions are answered and when they're not. Being helpful is super important, but it is not helpful when an LEA or a person at a school or a teacher can call up to a state agency, any state agency, and get 4 different answers from 4 different people. That's not a sign of success.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. What is the role of charter schools in public education, and what would you change about them, if anything?
Charter schools are public education. And charter schools there's a variety of reasons for charter schools to exist. It may be to try something new. It may be to meet a need in an area that doesn't have as many choices. One of my charter schools actually was started because the district hadn't built schools in that area quite yet, and the community wanted a neighborhood school. There are other charter schools that exist for very specific missions. They want to serve a particular community, and they start. Charter schools have a life cycle. They're there as long as students come through their door. And we need to make sure to embrace that. So when a charter school is not bringing in students, then it's not a school that needs to continue. They need to relook at their mission and reestablish, or they need to close. So the life cycle of a charter school, I think, needs to really, we need to remember that we don't just keep schools open just to keep them open. We keep them open while they meet the needs of students. And that, I think, it sounds harsh, but it's a reality. And I think that we would be best served. I think we use our scarce resources, our scarce education dollars most effectively when we understand that reality. Charter schools also, there's a lot in policy and rule, laws, expectations. One thing that really helps charter schools is when they work together to understand the expectations and laws and policies and rules. I'd like to see more of that, more charters working together, and actually charters working with non-charters, other public schools. One of my favorite experiences was on what was called a principal partnership network, where principals got together in a geographic area and learned from one another. And that is where I got to know the director at Beehive Academy. And we learned, several of us, I was in Canyons at the time, several of us learned just as much from the innovative things they were doing as they learned from what we were doing in Canyons. And that relationship persists today. And it's a great relationship, and it needs to happen more often. Charter schools sometimes come up with solutions to problems out of absolute necessity. And in some ways, districts in some places don't have to come, their solutions are by the district rather than by the school. So it's a really interesting synergy when you can get the two together, and I think that needs to happen more often. Rising tide lifts all boats.
I had several compelling questions for me, but I had to choose one, so I'm playing by the rules. And I chose this one, and maybe I'll have a chance to ask the other one later. you mentioned, I was really impressed by one of the principles you mentioned or goals of loose outcomes, tight procedures. And I have it backwards.
Yep.
Tight outcomes, or tight procedures,
Tight on outcomes,
tight
loose
on
on
outcomes.
procedure.
loose on procedures.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you did.
I was really impressed by that and thought it was a very creative approach. I'm concerned that, given the very prescriptive bills we see from the legislature, and sometimes demand on the data that we get at the outcomes, which makes more sense if they're tight outcomes, that is easier said than done. That it's a pretty slick thing to say, but hard to do.
Yeah.
So what might you do, and if you could be as specific as possible, what might you do to make those, the procedures
make it
less
happen.
prescriptive? And you also talked just a minute ago about unleashing LEAs, which is great, but unleashed, we don't get the same outcomes from those unleashed LEAs. So I just want to know how those two fit together well for you.
Absolutely. And there's no, I was very cognizant of my audience, and my audience included legislators, and they needed to hear the message, tight on outcomes, loose on process. And when I speak with legislators, I speak about that exact thing. And when I talk about bills with legislators have already started opening bill files and have already started I've already talked to them about some of the things that they're wanting to do. And there's a couple of them that I've talked to fairly often that know that I say that, and they, yeah, I know, yeah, outcomes, more than process. I think we have to take that message to our legislature. I think we have to show that we can do that as a board in our rulemaking, that we can give options, and I think we have. Of course, right now, I cannot think of a perfect example, but there are places where in our rules we have said it doesn't matter if they create a policy or if they have an individual rule. I'm kind of thinking the toilet training rule was one where we gave some LEA autonomy, but the outcome was what we wrote into the rule. We have to do that in our rulemaking, and we have to show the legislature that we can handle, we can make rules in that way. What we really need to do, though, is hold LEAs accountable when they don't have the outcomes, to show that theory works. Because it doesn't work if we then, when the outcomes come back and they're not what they need to be, if we go, oh, shoot, maybe next time. In order to be tight on outcomes, but loose on process, and in order to allow an LEA to be unleashed to innovate, we have to be tight on outcomes. And I don't want that part to be forgotten, because it is a key piece and that's why our expectations need to be clear, and that's why we need to have better data systems and better systems, so that when things don't have the outcome that we're looking for, that we talk about that honestly, openly, and we expect better results out of our LEAs or our school or charter or whomever we're dealing with. One thing that comes to mind, we just had a school construction audit that was released yesterday. And we've got some LEAs that are not complying. They weren't named in the audit. It's not a witch hunt, but we know that that's an area of risk where our LEAs perhaps are not. Our system of using attestations is not producing the outcomes that it should. We have a responsibility well, the board has a responsibility, and also then therefore the agency has a responsibility to find a different way to hold people accountable, because we can't allow for the innovation and allow for the unleashed and allow for that if we're not tight on the outcomes. So the way to do it is to show that we mean business on outcomes. And then that will allow the legislature and others to see that we mean business, which will then allow them, because in a lot of cases, they're reactive. They're reacting to situations. If we prevent those situations from happening, and with the systems that we set up for our LEAs, then they won't have situations to react to.
I do.
Yeah.
So you said many times, we need to have good outcomes, or or consequences for our, and so, I agree, how could you not? What specifically would be those outcomes that you'd propose?
Well, it depends on what we're, sure. If an LEA chooses to use its money in not the way the legislature intended it for it to be used, and it was clear, then they need to pay the money back. If the LEA builds a school and doesn't get the proper firewalls put in or the correct occupancy documentation, then they need to get the firewalls put in and get the correct occupancy certificates. Just like we expect students to meet our expectations, we have a responsibility, because of taxpayer money, because of public trust, to make sure that whatever the wrong is corrected. And we need to do better at that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Hart,
Yes.
can you give me 1 to 2 strategies you would focus on to close the equity gap we see in many of our schools across our state, where we have students with less family support and resources?
Sure. A rising tide lifts all boats. Absolutely. So when we improve our strategies for teaching EL students, we improve our strategies for teaching all students. When we, that's one strategy, is when you're looking at teaching strategies, when you're looking at asking a district to set their annual goals or their Title I goals, and asking for growth in EL learners, that is meeting the equity concern. That is raising the bar for everyone. When you use an individual-centric, and I know I don't want to sound like a broken record, but truly, when you look at the system as a system that meets the need, you're looking at the individual level of a student and a teacher in a classroom, that's when those concerns dissipate, because you're looking at it at an individual basis. It's no longer you're dealing with a group of individuals. You are looking to maximize, the teacher is looking to maximize the learning for all students, each and every one of them, on an individual basis, regardless of color, creed, status, anything. So you use that when you're doing your professional development, when you're providing opportunities for teachers, when you are, when the SEA, when the state agency is deciding where to put their efforts, when the board is deciding what their strategic initiatives are, you have that individual perspective. Then you're no longer partitioning groups and you're meeting the needs of every single student. Because today, the struggling student may be my child. Tomorrow, the struggling student might be your child, and my child's off, just living their best life. Kids change, kids develop, kids surprise us. One thing I know from 25 years of mostly sitting in the principal's office, being the principal, not in trouble with but is that there's one constant in life, and it's not just change, it's that your child will be different every day they wake up, and they will surprise you, and we're all in this together. Families and schools together can meet the needs of those individual students, even when students' families don't have they don't have the bandwidth at that time. If the school is performing at the level it should be, then all the students' needs are being met, not just the ones with the parents that show up, not just the ones with certain opportunities, all the students, because you've taken an approach that meets the individual needs. Does that help answer? It's a little bit of a soapbox.
All right, Dr. Hart, as a charter school director, some people may say that you've operated within a framework that offers greater autonomy and flexibility compared to traditional public school districts who have publicly elected school boards. How do you plan to adapt your leadership experience to address the complexities of statewide education systems which involve diverse district structures, regulatory requirements, and stakeholder interests? And specifically, how would you scale successful practices from one charter context to benefit all public schools across the state?
Okay. Well, first of all, I've only spent 2.5 years in the charter world. The rest of it was in in here and in the state of Georgia. So I have plenty of experience within the confines or the bounds of an LEA. Running an SEA and providing the systems in which charters and traditional LEAs operate is different than running an LEA. So it's not as much scaling up as it is taking those experiences and making sure that you're providing opportunities for people, districts, charters, individual schools. You're creating the conditions for them all to succeed. The state agency does not, obviously, we don't work with students directly the way an LEA does, the way a school does. So what we're here to do is create systems. We're not here to do the LEA's job. We're here to create the systems in which different types of LEAs, whether it's charter or traditional or whatever hybrid or whatever version in between, we're creating systems so that they can flourish. What needs to happen in order for that to happen is clear communication so that we understand what the challenges are and that we're working to help remove roadblocks for their success. It's not a matter of taking what I do at Summit or what I've done in Canyons or what I did in Muskogee County, Georgia. It's not taking that and scaling it up. It's looking at it from a different perspective, having that perspective, having that range of experiences, but creating systems, data systems, transparency systems, high standards, high expectations, so that they all can flourish. If you think this is not a grown-up LEA position, it is in no way on that spectrum. It's a completely different way of looking at the education system, and the responsibility of an SEA is to provide the resources and the support and the structures for all of the large, small, rural, urban, private system, if that's how the public system is defined in the state, whatever the legislature throws at us, we need to be agile enough to be able to help them succeed. That's our responsibility as a state agency. So I know that kind of sidesteps that question a little bit, to be very honest, but it's not a matter of scaling up or scaling down. It's a matter of using the perspective in order to create success, the conditions for success, the conditions for excellence for everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Hart, I have a question, and I want to preface it with this article that was in the Salt Lake Tribune from yesterday.
Okay.
And the headline reads, "Code violations, safety issues, Utah State School Board fails to oversee district construction projects, state auditors find." And just bear with me, I'm just going to quote 2 paragraphs. "The Utah State School Board is failing to adequately oversee school construction in the state, allowing Utah school districts to bypass building code and inspection requirements on new projects," state auditors find. "While schools are responsible for their own compliance, USBE has not fulfilled its oversight responsibilities nor enforced compliance according to its authority," the report states. And then it goes on to say that since 2017, 87% of school construction projects in the state have been issued without the required USBE permit to begin construction.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do we fix this as a state board? How do we address this so board members are not learning about 87% of the school construction projects being issued or where work has begun without the required permit? And I'm using this as an example, but I mean, in terms of our accountability to the legislature, to the people of Utah, how do we avoid this from happening in the future?
Absolutely. Yes, and I started to use it as an example a little earlier, probably without enough context. But and that's yesterday's legislative audit meeting was very interesting. Those are all true statements. That is what the audit says. What the article doesn't say is the way that we have used, or the way we have gone after compliance or getting to making sure that districts are doing what they are required to do, is through attestation. So they fill out a form that they have done those things, attesting that they're done. What was found is they might be attesting, but it's not done. And that's exactly what I mean by high expectations being tight on outcomes. Clearly, an attestation is not working. So now we have a responsibility. The state board has a responsibility. The state agency then implements those decisions to figure out a different system of compliance. One of the things that, and I spoke with Speaker Schultz about this because he is part of leading the legislative audit committee, and I spoke with him yesterday at the committee meeting and then again last night. And the question that some legislators have is, should USBE have authority over school construction programs? And is that appropriate? And I spoke yesterday about in a presentation about being willing to pivot and being willing to acknowledge failure and then pivoting to something that when you're wrong, and you got to admit it and move on and do something else and do something different. So I think the solution for this particular issue in particular is realizing that our system of attestation isn't working, first of all. Second, going to the legislature, which they've already opened a bill file, to look at the issue, whether or not we should be, whether or not our state agency should be involved in in that oversight, because a lot of those funds are local funds. They are property taxes. They aren't necessarily, in many cases, our funds. So it becomes an interesting conversation where you've got to sort out all of the pieces, parts of it, the funding sources, the expectations, the laws. The other question that it raises is, what is the overall picture of getting those certificates of occupancy and the whole process of school construction? So I understand from other legislators that there's some interest on surrounding school construction, even as the whole, not just the certification and the occupancy and the building codes, but just the issue of buildings themselves and what they look like and the cost effectiveness. In this particular case, the way the state agency responded to this audit was to say that it needs to go to the board for a much larger conversation. And as in one of my duties is audit chair, and I was part of writing that response. And the response is, we can't give you a response because it needs a full conversation by the board. And I think that this is an example of where we need to pivot, where we need to have conversations with our legislators, and we need to talk to our LEAs about the challenges that they have in building and why there's a lack of compliance and why there's these things are happening, why the fire walls aren't being put where they need to be, and why the paperwork is late, and see if there are barriers that we can remove. We also need to address whether or not we've dedicated an adequate amount of staff to the issue. But quite frankly, this one feels bigger than just a staff issue. This is a philosophical issue about school buildings, LEAs having the autonomy to build, but the responsibility to make sure that those buildings are safe and up to code and the way they should be for our children to attend. So it's an excellent case study of where we need to be able to work together with our partners, work together with our LEAs, but admit that the system as it currently stands is not working very clearly, and make changes.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Hart, hi. You brought up math standards, and so just for a little context, we're redoing math standards, and I've been looking through what's being proposed and utilizing AI and technology to look at results and where we are. And I would say after 10, 12 years of Common Core, we've gone down. We're not going up in math. And as Utah's state and in all things, like I'm interested in innovation, and I see us, I think in this last election and with what the Trump administration is trying to do with the Department of Education, that we're kind of at this hinge point with a historical opportunity to make significant change. And I would love to see Utah lead out for the rest of the country and compete globally with top performers in the world, not just be status quo with, well, we're doing okay in our country.
Right.
And so as the state superintendent, I think you will face significant barriers to transformative change in public education. There have been some observations like governance in public education is fragmented, often compared to a school bus with multiple steering wheels, each with limited impact on student success. And classroom teachers are given autonomy to resist or veto policies from USBE and the legislature, in their classroom. How do we inspire them to be on board? And then there's also institutional inertia reinforced by our large workforce at USBE with entrenched traditions, wanting to hold on, resisting change, favoring the status quo. but I think our state and country are clearly asking for change, as is the legislature in response. How will you overcome these barriers to drive transformative change as the USBE sets new directions for Utah's public education system so we can lead out and compete with the top performing countries in the world?
That's what excites me the most, is that transformative change. Every place I've gone, every place I've ever been assigned as a principal and administrator, or every place that I've sought out because change needed to happen. And I love putting teams together and moving us towards an audacious goal. We absolutely need to remember what our North Star is. Our North Star is academic achievement, academic excellence for all students. And there are more similarities when you get disparate stakeholders together than there are differences. We all want the same thing. We just can't seem to find the path that unites us. We seem to get stopped by the barriers that really are artificial. And so when I lead an organization or a group, a lot of times I find myself saying to somebody, so what? Really? Really? And sometimes you have to say the quiet parts out loud. Sometimes you have to do hard things and people think you're crazy. And that's okay, because we're moving towards a goal. And when people know that and I'm a little worried about the school bus with many steering wheels. I like to think of it as a canoe with people paddling in different directions. It is so frustrating when you're in a canoe and the person, or a rowboat, and the person that's supposed to be paddling with you is paddling to the opposite shore. I used to call kayaks divorce makers, but that's the synergy. That's the magic, is when you get people rowing in the same direction, even though they have wildly different views on, I don't know, shoes or politics or grade configurations. We're marching to the same thing, which is academic excellence. Math in particular is a tough one, because so many times we think, I like how I was taught, or a teacher remembers their own classroom, and so that's their hidden mental model. And we just have to confront it. We have to say the quiet parts out loud. We have to say, did that really work for everyone? We have to look at the data. We have to be willing to find the outliers. That's why I love what ULEAD does. That's why I love what some of our districts are doing, using our data to find the outliers, reach out to the people that are doing it, and then make it their own. That's how you move forward. You move forward when the steps on the ladder are close enough that people can take the next step up. And so it's our job to make that metaphorical ladder, both within our agency, which then creates the systems for the LEAs and the districts to do it, but also lead among the states, lead among lead among countries. There are things that we can learn from other places. We just have to be willing to learn the lessons and then say, what if? And don't let those artificial barriers be stopping points. They're caution points, and you consider them, but then you remove the barriers. You say, why can't we do such and such thing? Why can't we do this a different way? There are so many things that we adopt in education because they're comfortable. And we've got to get out of that space of comfort. It takes a lot of courage. It sometimes takes thick skin. In the case of our SEA, our state agency, it takes a willing board that's courageous and willing to take that step. And in order to make it so that a board or an agency can do that, you've got to paint the picture. You've got to be transparent about what your plan is, how you're going to get there, make it easy for people to be part of, and make it exciting, make it something people want to be a part of. I also like to work with the willing first. So you take an LEA that wants to move forward. We were meeting with Senate President recently, and he talked about some innovations that are happening in Texas, and he's interested in perhaps pursuing them here in Utah, and wanted some feedback on that. And one of the things that worked for a couple of districts, larger districts in Texas, is to work with the willing schools and teachers. To me, that's a great place to start. When you work with the willing school community council, that's where I started at one of my schools. Actually, two. Start with proposing something to the group of parents that want to be involved. Say, hey, what happens if we offer a wheel of electives? Instead of making people choose just one, they can do 6 weeks of 5 different ones. What if we flipped the expectation? And they're like, oh, that's different. Well, why don't we try it for a year? Why don't we give it a shot? Make it easy for people to be part of your initiative. Make it easy for people to be part of trying something, the innovation, and then build from the success. And that's how you build an innovation. That's how you build a movement. Start with the willing, grow it, make it easy for people to see the picture, make it easy for people to get on board, and keep growing it. But keep your North Star so that you can keep your thick skin.
All right, Dr. Hart. I have a couple I really want to ask, but I'll do this one. I'm like Carol. Member Lear. So mine is this one. The role of superintendent will require reviewing and responding to a constant flow of information, including audits, performance reports, and stakeholder input, while also working closely with a board-led governing body. How will you prioritize and manage the areas that need attention, particularly when facing limited time and resources? And what are 2 traits you possess that demonstrate your ability to lead a complex state agency effectively and in partnership with a board?
Okay. Let me start by saying, first was the flow of information and all of the, yes, I've done that. I'm doing that now as a board member who is also head of an LEA. I love the flow of information. I love reading the reports. I love absorbing. I love talking with, one strategy I use is going right to the source. Sometimes, instead of reading a report, I call up the person that wrote the report and we have a conversation instead. That's prioritization. That's figuring out what you need to know now versus what you can learn about later. That is one strategy for managing that. There is being in leadership on the state board prepares me for that. That flow of information is unrelenting, and you can drown in it. But you just learn to sift through it as it comes in. You learn to figure out what is now and what is later, and you just learn it. It's an intuition. The other thing you do is make sure that you have your trusted advisors that are experts in don't try to be the expert in everything. You find and cultivate leaders, and you surround yourself with people smarter than you are. That, I think, is one of the hardest lessons, one of the most humbling lessons of leadership, but one of the most valuable. If I'm always with people that are smarter than me, I'm doing something right. And if I need something, if I need information on math, I'm not going to be the math expert, but I know who to call, and I know a couple of different people with a couple of different perspectives, and so I call them both so that I can kind of land where I need to land and kind of weigh that information against each other. So a couple of the traits, I think I've spoke to a couple of them. Surround yourself with really, really smart people. Make sure that you have people that you can trust for certain areas so that you don't have to be the expert, or you don't, worse yet, you don't believe you're an expert when you're really not. That's a fatal flaw of leadership. In some cases, lack of leadership, actually. The other thing is just working. You know, I'll be honest, I love the work. I love to immerse myself in it. I love to be part of it. I love to be out in the schools and see how different people envision the same standard. Like our art, you know, we see so many different perspectives on some of the same themes. If you stay curious as a leader and you listen and you are willing to hear things that are hard to hear and stay open to that feedback, and you make it so that people can say things to you that maybe they think, maybe I shouldn't say this. If you make it so that they can say those things to you, then you have a better sense, you have a better filter, and you're able to make better decisions. Those are just a couple of the ways that I would manage the flow of information, the fast-paced nature of an SEA. In education, as an educational leader, as a school leader, no 2 days are the same, and it's almost like, don't you dare plan out your day, because the minute you write that down on paper, it will change. And if you think that you're going to finish these 5 things, you got another think coming, because don't you dare wait till the last minute on reports that are due into USBE or your grant applications, because the minute that there's a deadline, you're going to have a crisis. Somebody's going to need your attention, and something else is gonna steal your time from what you so delicately planned out. So just being flexible, being open, being able to hear people, making it safe for people to say things to you, not jumping to conclusions. Those are all traits that you need to have as a leader at this level.
We have a follow-up for clarity.
Sure.
Thank you. And you highlighted very eloquently the dynamics that do exist in this realm, because we have staff, we have our experts, we have our panels, we have our committees. We also have the board members, and we exist to represent the people. Right. And sometimes those different bodies can be in conflict, and that feedback comes to a stone wall. So what is that dynamic that how do you create a space where there aren't maybe power structures put in place where work is stagnated and feedback from its end consumer, students, teachers, parents, families, isn't addressed?
You have to be willing. There is a grain of truth in everything, no matter how it's presented, no matter how it's what it's couched in. You have to dig, you have to persist in. Sometimes when there's so much feedback coming into a system, we try to shortcut it by discounting it quicker than it should be discounted. So you have to slow down, you have to listen for sometimes the underlying message, because sometimes we'll get 100 emails on a topic, and it's easy to file those 100 emails away in a folder, with a title and worry about it later. But what you really need to do is stop, look at it, and look for the message that's sometimes underneath the message. What are people saying? Ask them a little bit more about, well, why are you saying that? Like, what experience brought you to that? It's a matter of, if we do things the way we've always done them, we're going nowhere. In those dissenting voices lies a solution, lies innovation. You've got to be open to hearing it. Having said that, you also have to keep your North Star. Our North Star is academic excellence. That's why we have to get through a strategic planning process. Because without a strategic plan, we're rudderless. So we don't have anything to hang that feedback on. We don't have anywhere to gauge. We have nowhere to take it, really. It's just, okay, people gave us feedback, but we haven't set our direction, so we don't know what to do with it. So sometimes when it's a brick wall, I actually don't think that it's intended as a brick wall. It's just people don't know what to do with the information. So that's why our agency exists, to then take that and move with it. The agency is the army that takes that feedback and considers where we're trying to go and figures out how to get from here to there. So we have to listen, we have to hear the underlying message, we have to have a direction to take it and then go with it and not be afraid of failure. That's the other piece. Sometimes when it feels like it's a stone wall, really it's just fear. And so the question is, what are we afraid of? What's the fear? And of course, I can't go an entire interview without mentioning what's the risk? What is our risk associated with this? And then deal with the risk and move forward. Sometimes it's just plain fear.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. If it's okay with the board, I'd like to reserve my question for 5 minutes before the end of the interview. Let me tell you my question before I take such liberties. My question is simply, is there anything else that you would like this board to know before we close this interview? Or if there was a question that you would like to offer clarity on, Dr. Hart. So if that's okay with the board, I would reserve my question for the last 5 minutes. With that, let's open it up. We will still do one question at a time, but I will check this monitor and we will begin open questions. It looks like we have in order for the first three, Member Bogus, Member Earl, Member Booth. Go ahead, Member Bogus.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. I appreciate your time this afternoon. Excuse me, in 2022, an audit found that the Utah education system, including this agency, has, and I'm quoting, a culture of noncompliance. This conclusion and assertion continue to surface in subsequent audits and evaluations and was even referenced in this interview today. So my question is, do you believe the current resources being used do you believe current resources are being used effectively to enforce compliance with the law? What concrete actions will you take to review, reform, and hold the individuals of this agency or other agencies accountable for persistently ignoring legal and regulatory requirements?
When it is not acceptable to ignore regulatory requirements, Absolutely not acceptable. And I'm not sure the context of which ones they're talking about in that particular case, but I have followed the audits, the internal audits, the OLEG audits, the state auditor audits for a number of years. And one of the things that I see is that when a recommendation is made or when non-compliance is found, sometimes the conversation stops. And it's for a variety of reasons, but the conversation cannot stop. And that's what I mean by acknowledging failure and then retooling and correcting the error, the non-compliance, holding people accountable for the expectations. We've got to figure out why it happens, why it happened, and then it's either it's a legislative issue, it's something, we find places where code contradicts, and that we have a responsibility to take that back to legislature and say, which is it? And sometimes we just let it slide because we have so many things, so many different things that we're chasing. I'd like to chase fewer things and chase them to completion and then take on more things. That's one of the concerns that I have is sometimes I feel like we tackle too many things at once. I think that our lists are long when we go to legislature, and sometimes I think we go a little too late. This year we started meeting recently. Instead of waiting till October, we started meeting just this week with legislative leaders so that they can hear it before they're panicked right before the session. So one concrete strategy would be to help the board focus in on specific areas that they would like clarity and would like to clean up and get straightened out before going on to another area. UPAC is an example. We can work on those strategies. It was brought up in interim, actually, just this morning. Work on that area before we take on the next area. We have a tendency to do a lot of things at once, and then things don't get to completion. So that's one concrete strategy. Non-compliance is not okay. We have to make sure that we're completing the process rather than just saying, oh, here's one audit, let's just move to the next audit. Let's just move to the next audit. And then we lose the thread, and it doesn't get followed up until 3 years later, somebody else does an audit. We're like, oh, yeah, that's an issue. We need to stay disciplined enough to clean up the areas we need to clean up before moving on to others. And that's something that I would do my part in helping the board to, provide clarity and guidance around that. And then the agency then, fulfills whatever the board wants the agency to do, and then move on to another. Of course, we're always in a changing policy environment. I know there's already bill files open, but the more we can do preventative and the more we can do linearly, we'll be better off in that area.
Yes, let me just set a tone here for Dr. Hart. We've got about 11 minutes before our last question.
Oh, okay.
We have a follow-up for clarity here, and then 5 additional board
Oh,
members.
geez, okay.
So
Short answers.
if you choose.
Okay,
Member Bogus.
I'll try.
Thank you, and I appreciate your response. You didn't address your strategies for accountability. Part of the question was, what concrete actions will you do to hold individuals or agencies accountable for persistently ignoring legal and regulatory requirements?
Expectations for people need to be very clear, and when they don't meet those expectations, we either need to create a different path or their performance is not adequate. That's an HR issue. you help people, you give them expectations. At the end of the day, individuals have a choice on whether or not that's what they wish to do for a job, and if they don't, then you separate from that's the brutal truth of it. And that's the reality in any job. We're not a jobs agency. We're here to accomplish a mission. But you hope that you provide the tools and you have people in the places that they want to achieve what the goals of the organization are. But if they're not, then it's not the right place for them.
Thank you. We've got next, here's the list. Member Earl, Member Booth, Member Reel, Member Davis, Member Lear.
Oh, my heavens.
Member Earl, go ahead.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
And I think this actually, Board Member Lear, as well as Board Member Bogus and Board Member Green hit on this a little bit. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit because I am interested in that compliance piece too. And can you deliver compliance to people that in the education community who are constituents, friends, that type of a thing?
Sure.
How would you deliver a message that came from the board that we voted to support let's say maybe a constitutional amendment or flexibility or something in the system? How do you deliver that message to the education community from and on behalf of the board? So it's not really compliance, but it's along that line of having to have that harder conversation with friends and in the community members.
Oh, yeah. So you tell the truth. And there's one thing to have friends. There's a whole nother thing to be a leader. And I was a principal before I was 30. And I've had to say to people much older than me and people that have been in their positions much longer than I was, some hard truths. And I've always been a turnaround principal. And so people just know that that's your job and that's your role. And you separate the personal from the professional. And clear is kind. And sometimes, it's hard. And it's not easy. I don't want anybody to think that a hard conversation is easy and I'm some freak of nature that can have a crucial conversation with somebody delivering news that's tough to swallow. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And you just have to speak the truth. You have to respect the person enough, respect your audience enough that you tell them the truth. And that is hard. And that is, it's hard for a person to take. But what's really harder is when you find out later that you weren't told the truth. And our LEAs deserve the truth. Our employees deserve the truth. You deserve the truth. It's just something you do. It's something that you understand. It's your responsibility. And I guess you're not a really good friend if you blend the personal with the professional. You're also not a good leader. And so you have compassion, and in this role, in the role of principal, and the role of, I serve a board right now at Summit Academy, and they've made decisions that I wouldn't personally do that if I was king for a day, but they did. And so that's the direction we're going. And it's my job and my responsibility, and it's the right thing to do for whomever the message is for, to be clear, to be matter of fact, but to also understand there's a human there too. So I don't know if that gets to, sometimes it is hard to say the quiet parts out loud, but it is important and it must be done.
Thank you. Member Booth.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. From your perspective and experience, what is the greatest financial need in Utah public education?
The greatest financial need in public education would be to fund our teachers, to fund our teachers. Do you mean beyond, like, no, the most important thing we do is fund educators that work with children.
Thank you, Member Reel.
Sorry to make you work, Chair. Dr. Hart, many teachers are feeling like they aren't trusted, they're defeated, and feel targeted by the legislature and even our board. How specifically, or can you give an example of how you would protect our educators from the political vitriol and rhetoric as a state superintendent? And what message would you have to them to stay in the classroom?
You can't necessarily protect people from hearing or receiving messages, nor should you try. However, you help them understand the bigger picture so that it's in context, and you help them understand the truths. It almost goes back to the previous question where we have to tell the truth, and the truth is that there are concerns that people have about educators in the classroom, and there are questions they're asking. But you have to help them understand and put that in context. That doesn't mean that that each individual teacher is next on the chopping block. You have to help. Teachers have a perspective, a very narrow, like their classroom is their world and their life and their joy, and it brings immense joy to be a teacher and lead a classroom, and to move kids along a continuum. When they start taking the larger messages and making them personal is when you run into danger. And by helping them understand and put it in context, and you ask them things like, do you really think they mean you? Or, what did you do today that made you think that they're speaking to you? Or why do you think that there are some parents that feel this way? When you have a conversation with them and you talk about things openly and honestly, and you truly have that conversation, those things tend to dissipate. At the end of the day, we have the best teachers out there at different levels. Everybody has a story about an amazing teacher that changed their life. And those teachers just sometimes need to be reminded of that, because the messages become personal when they're not meant personally. And then you help them be part of the solution. And you help them, things shouldn't happen to teachers, things should happen with teachers. And that's how the SEA, the leader of the state agency, that's how a school superintendent can help put it in context and make sense of what's happening. You just have to have open and honest conversations. They have to be real. We have to be real about the challenges we're seeing, and we have to make solutions. The way to diminish anxiety is to make a plan and move forward. And teachers need to be part of that solution, and they need to feel like things aren't just happening to them, that they're part of the solution and they're part of what's happening, and that goes a long way.
Thank you. Dr. Hart, we've got just over 5 minutes left. We've got 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
And then mine if we can get to it. But
Okay.
We're looking at 4:05. We're going to go to Member Davis.
Thank you. Sometimes there are indications of our needing to provide efficiencies in the future as to the operations of our office or agency. What does that mean to you? Do you feel that the board or agency has all of its critical FTEs to provide support to the LEAs, or are we too big?
The answer to that is I don't know. That's one of the first things that I would do in the first 90 days is start a review of our resources, a review of where we put, where our sources of revenue are, where our obligations are, where we've made commitments, where we believe we've made commitments, but those commitments have passed. I think we have, it's a basic law, I think that it's so much easier to add something than to subtract. And we need to look at if we do need that, we don't, I will not say that we are or we aren't, because I'm not in the role and I haven't done the research. But that's one of the first things I would do, because we're not going to get any more FTE unless we prove that we need it. So my first job would be to prove that we needed it. But in order to prove that we need it, I would have to be convinced of that myself, and I don't have that data right now. So one of the first things I would do is get in there, get in here, figure out what we're spending our money on, where, who we're spending our money on, where the funding sources are, and really come up with some good hard data to bring back to the board to answer those questions. You're not the only one with that question. That question is one of the most prevalent questions that we've seen over every year I've been involved with the legislature and the state board. So that's a top priority of mine.
Thank you. Member Lear.
You want to go ahead, Matt? Mine can wait.
We're not waiting. Go ahead.
Well, tell another.
Go for it.
Okay. You're in a unique position, having served on the board and now wanting to work for the board. I've kind of been there. And you've mentioned several times difficult conversations. I want to ask you, how well do you think this board has done in having difficult conversations?
With who?
With each other.
I don't know, because I only have my perspective. I only know my perspective and the conversations that I've had with people, and I've had plenty of difficult conversations with different members. I think that it's easy to go to the, and it's kind of related to a question that was asked earlier. It's easy to jump to the next subject because we've got so much on the plate. And I think it's why our strategic plan has taken quite a bit of time in the making. We do need to have hard conversations, but we also need the time to have hard conversations, and we haven't found that time. And so I think there are more conversations to be had. I think there's work to be done in that area. I do. I think that it is, I want to address the fact that I would be going from the state board to working for the agency. I have approached my position as a state board member as one of learning and leading and always trying to understand whatever the topic is. And I would take all of that information into my job. What I've realized is I like doing the work. I like being in the schools. I like being on the work side of the equation. I've loved being on the board, but the work is where my heart is. And so the board needs to, each board member needs to take it upon themselves to figure out what it means to be a good board member. And then the agency then takes what the board figures out and operationalizes it. So I think it's up to the board how effective it wants to be, each individual board member.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. Here's the question. You've heard it before. Is there anything else that you'd like this board to know before we close this interview? Or is there any question that you as, I don't know how you multitask, reflect in your mind, whether this interview or earlier, that you would like to offer clarity on.
Oh, and thank you for the process. Thank you for the opportunity to engage in the process. Of course, I'd love a number of questions back to answer again, or to answer more clearly, or to ask probing questions. Almost every question that's asked, I have a follow-up question for the person that asked it. And I want it to turn into a full-blown conversation. The event last night, I wanted to be in the audience, and I wanted the audience I wanted it to be flipped, because I wanted to hear what the audience had to say. I didn't necessarily want to be the one talking. I wanted to be the one listening. But it is important that this board understands how important it is that every Utah student gets an opportunity for a high quality education. Education for me was truly a door opener. I don't know how else to say it. And I had young parents who knew that they wanted wanted me to succeed, but they didn't know how. They didn't know how to navigate the education system. They weren't coming to all the meetings. They were working. They couldn't get really involved in the PTA or bake things for the bake sales that we used to have, or that kind of thing. My family relied on the education system to be high quality without their involvement. And so that's what's important, that yes, it's fabulous when we can engage parents and find ways to engage them despite their busy lives and the things that they have going on. But I want an education system that is excellent despite involvement and despite needing pushes from different places. I want the system to be excellent because we've set up systems where teachers and schools and communities can have excellent schools for everyone, no matter what. And I have never left school. School has never left me. Education is truly, it's the ticket to freedom. And it's the ticket to liberty. And I believe that to my very core. And I want that for every student in Utah. And every student, no matter they're 5, 6, 18, or 21 or older, I'm passionate about it. I care about it. I have the experience. I've gathered the different varied experiences to bring solutions, come up with solutions. I don't impose solutions. I let solutions emerge from the conditions. When an opportunity strikes, and turning it into something greater, and just creating that synergy and getting everybody rowing in the same direction. That's what I love as a leader. I would be absolutely honored to serve as the next superintendent of Utah Schools.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hart, for your time, for your answers to our questions here. We know it's been a long process, and we appreciate your patience with it. Board members, at this time, we will take a 10-minute break. Dr. Hart, if you want to check with Dakota Cambruzzi, she can give you next steps.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, board members. Board members, welcome back. Dr. Dalton, we invite you to come forward, have a seat at the end of this table here. Put you in the hot seat. Dr. Dalton, for your information, each board member will ask one question at a time during the interview. Each member may ask one follow-up question if needed for clarity, and questions should be succinct and professional to maximize time. After each board member has either asked one question or declined to do so, the chair will open the floor for additional questions and will call on board members in the order in which requests are made. Today, or for this interview, we will begin with Member Green and work counterclockwise until we go around the table. We will have 90 minutes. We'll take about 90 minutes, plus or minus a couple if necessary. Okay? At this time, before we go into questions, Dr. Dalton, as you sit before the public for the first time in an interview, we invite you to introduce yourself, and then we'll open up with questions.
Okay. I'd first like to thank the State Board of Education for allowing me the opportunity to be in this capacity. I'd also like to compliment the board on all the work that you've done to get to this point of the interview. It's been very well done, very thorough. And a little bit about me, I was raised in the small town of Minersville. I was raised on a farm. I was taught the value of hard work. I love education, had the opportunity to go to school because I wasn't able to work on the farm because I'm allergic to hay. You heard that last night. But that was something that I had to go to school, and I was the first generation in my family to go to school. I had the opportunity to be a teacher at Beaver High School, chemistry, math, physics. Then I moved into administration at Beaver High School as a vice principal. And then I was transferred to Melford Elementary, where we were a national blue ribbon school. And then I had the opportunity to go to Garfield County School District and be the superintendent there. I was in that capacity for 5 years. And then I had the opportunity to go to Kane County School District, and I've been there for the last 10 years as superintendent and work in that capacity.
Thank you, Dr. Dalton. Member Green.
All right, Dr. Dalton. And we're off.
We're off. Let's go.
All right. Okay. My question is, the role of superintendent will require reviewing and responding to a constant flow of information, including audits, performance reports, and stakeholder input, while also working closely with a board-led governing body. How will you prioritize and manage the areas that need attention, particularly when facing limited time and resources? And what are 2 traits you possess that demonstrate your ability to lead a complex state agency effectively in partnership with the board?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the question. When you have all these different things coming at you, you have to prioritize what's most important. And the way that I would do that is I would align that with the board's mission, vision, and goals. And as those are set and you start to create those priorities, the resources, the funding, the decisions that are made by the board have to align to those goals. And the closer you get the alignment, the more likely you are to hit those targets. The audits and those things, there are different components. You talked about audits and stakeholder feedback. I think stakeholder feedback is essential because people want to feel heard. And if they send you an email and they don't hear anything back, they just feel like my voice doesn't matter. When in reality, you have to be able to make people know that they are important and that they have a place at the table and that you understand their concerns, and you validate them, you research them, and you report back to them. The auditing piece, I've seen the state board that have had audits come to you, and how you address those audits to make sure that you have the compliance piece. What is found in the audit? What is the corrective plan for the audit? How do you make sure that we don't have those problems in the future? And that's how we can direct that, I think. But we have to be specific on our feedback. We have to know what our final goal is as a board, and how do we obtain that goal, and what units are we using to measure that. 2 traits that demonstrate a complex situation. I would say that I have the ability to find common ground, have the ability to listen to multiple voices, find the common threads that people may have that interest in. Typically, it aligns with what's in the best interest of students. And how do we get there? Now, the how we get there can be different, but if we end up in the place that everybody can agree upon, then we're in the right spot. I have, in my role as a superintendent, we deal with that. We take stakeholder feedback. We have public comment. We do those things in our boards, especially if things are controversial. People have very strong opinions on why the board should vote one way or another. And if we end up in a position where we vote, or I wouldn't be the one voting, obviously, but if we vote in the capacity that people are opposed to it, we need to be able to explain why. The why behind, this is why we voted, and the board is in a position where you have access to more information than probably a lot of people. And they have to trust you that you're going to make that decision for them. They elected you to represent them, and so they have that innate trust. In our district, what I see is they trust our school board members. We have a phenomenal school board. And if the school board says this is what it is, this is how it's going to be, this is the reason we voted this way, they understand the rationale behind it, and they trust those individuals to represent them. And that's how we've been able to navigate those complex waters and end up with success with multiple lines of input. Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Dr. Dalton, thank you for coming. My question revolves around innovation, and I'm in context, I think, with the vote that we've just had for president and a new administration, and in light of all that he's trying to do specifically with education and send things back to the states. I look at that as this historic kind of hinge point where we have this great opportunity. And as the state superintendent, you will have significant barriers to transformative change in public education. So these are some observations for context. I've heard it said that governance in public education is fragmented, often compared to a school bus with multiple steering wheels, each with limited impact on student success. Also, that classroom teachers in Utah can resist or veto policy directives from USBE and the legislature if they don't have buy-in in their own classrooms. And then there's institutional inertia reinforced by USBE's large workforce and entrenched traditions that resist change and favor the status quo. And yet our state and country are clearly asking for change in education. Our constituents have voted for that. So how would you overcome these barriers to drive transformative change as the USBE sets new directions for Utah's public education system so we can lead out? I would love to see us lead out and compete with the top performing countries when it comes to math, science, STEM, technology. How can we move to change and innovate?
Yes, I appreciate the question. I view myself as a transformational leader. I think it is important to be on the cutting edge and be the first one out, to be able to show that you have a proof of concept, that you can really do it. You're talking about changes at the federal level. I agree with you. This is a new time for public education. Something that we'd have to do is to make sure that we have the accountability needed when we receive the federal money, if it ends up coming here or wherever that lands. But we also cannot put additional roadblocks or barriers towards districts or charters. Sometimes we may inadvertently put things in that may be more arduous than it needs to be. So we need to make sure that that money flows to the areas that it needs to, that it's meeting the goals of, if you're looking at the Title I, Title II, Title III areas, is it really going to meet the intention of what that funding was designated for? If you'd like me to go into each one of those areas, I could. But so as it comes through the state office, we need to make sure it's distributed correctly. The analogy of government is fragmented in multiple steering wheels. I guess my question would be is, who wants to drive the bus, right? Who's going to be the one behind the wheel, and who's going to be the leader in that capacity? I say that's the State Board of Education. Districts, charters, they look towards this state board to lead the state. So when the state's driving that and everyone can get on board with the mission and vision of this board, I think you can have more buy-in to reaching those goals that you've set. Transformational change, resist change. Whenever you bring change, there's going to be resistance. That's what I found. Change is never easy. You might think it's going to be something easy, but you're going to have somebody who's not going to do it. So this is how I implement change in the district. I do an opt-in model. I allow those people who will buy into that. So I'm just going to do a simple example. So we wanted to introduce smart TVs, okay, into our schools. So we have smart TVs, we have money. Who wants them in their classroom? I have about a third of the teachers who would raise their hand and say, I want them in my classroom. I have this next third, I'm going to call them the wait and sees. They're going to wait and see if this is going to be successful. So I take the group that says, I'm in, these are the innovators, these are the leaders. I said, let's move this forward. And I do everything in my power to make sure they're successful because they're the proof of concept. That's where the state board can be, is the proof of concept. This is how you do it. They could look to us. Utah has it figured out. The next thing I do is I plan on when those wait and see people are ready to move to the next level, I provide the training, resources, professional development, everything they need to help them get to that point where those innovative people are. You're going to have a third. I'm just throwing out some numbers, but I think you're going to have a third that are going to say, I am a traditional guard and nothing will change. No matter what you do, it's not going to happen. What happens is, as those other two groups move through the change, that last group is somewhat left out. They get pressure from their peers. They get pressure from community, from parents to conform and innovate. And then when you get the opt-in, it's a much better success rate than a top-down, you have to do it this way. If you don't do it this way, it's punitive. And there may be times for that, but I really like when you can get people to buy into the idea and the vision and the concept. I think we have greater success rate because their heart's in it and they believe in it, and then they become empowered to move the needle in success.
Thank you, Chair. My question, I'm just going to preface it by reading something from the Salt Lake Tribune that came out yesterday in the paper. And that says, the headline is, Utah State School Board fails to oversee district construction projects, auditor finds. And then just 2 paragraphs. The Utah State School Board is failing to adequately oversee school construction in the state, allowing Utah school districts to bypass building code and inspection requirements on new projects, state auditors found. And then it says, while schools are responsible for their own compliance, USBE has not fulfilled its oversight responsibilities nor enforced compliance according to its authority. And then it says, since 2017, 87% of construction projects began without the required USBE permit. So my question is, how can we expect our LEAs, our districts, to comply with the directives we send out when we aren't doing what we need to be doing in terms of oversight, and how would you correct that?
Yeah, great question, thank you. I read the same article, and I was looking at it from a district standpoint, right? And I thought, the best way, in my opinion, to correct that is you have to show people what done looks like. That's Brene Brown's work, Dare to Lead. And when you show people what the final product looks like, what does the state need for the accountability piece on construction? We complete many of documents. Whenever we do any type of construction, there's fire marshal inspections, there's security sign-offs on those. It seems like there are multiple accountability lines, so if we don't know where we're trying to hit the target, it becomes very difficult. The other piece is architects, general contractors, engineers, they're stamping those documents. As a district, I'm counting on their professionalism to tell me if that I am compliant or not compliant. I don't believe districts intentionally build something out of code. I think people are trying to do what's right, and they're counting on the experts to give them the information as they design those plans. So how can we expect LEAs to comply? Something that I'd like to see from the state level would be a calendar for the year of what are the end-of-level reporting requirements that the state would like to see, and what does that document look like? Typically what I see is I get an email that says, complete this survey and input. I have to go through that whole survey piece in Qualtrics, click, 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 asking for certain parts, and then I get to part partially through it, and I have to go ask somebody in the district office, where is this number? How do I find this? I didn't know what I needed to do to be accountable for that report. If I had a calendar that said, October 1st, your October 1 reports are coming out. We need the AFR and APR to be submitted, and it needs to be in this format with these object code and these budget codes. Your BAs will hit it. They'll do it. They can get to what you would like to have as the final product. But I think when it's vague, it becomes more difficult. In the book Extreme Ownership, they talk about keep things simple. Are we asking for the things that we need? That's a requirement for the accountability piece. Is it tied to state board rules? Is it tied to statute, or is it just something that somebody wants to know? I fill those reports out and I'm like, who looks at this? Is it really something that has to be done at the state level? And if it is, great, we'll provide it. But I want to know going in what I have to do to have that accountability piece. I think people want to do that. It's just we don't know what that end target looks like, and the more prescriptive and specific we can be about what that final product is, the done piece, the more likely we're going to be to hit those targets. And if we don't hit them, we go back and we provide training. What do you need help with? How did you miss the mark? Why are these object codes out of compliance with when you uploaded your AFR or APR? And then we have conversations at the district level, at their charter level. We can be a resource to help people be compliant and be successful. It doesn't have to be like, you did something wrong, and now we're going to have to come in and we're going to pull the money. There's always some threat, usually with money, because that's kind of how we do things, right? But I do think that we can be a resource. There is a compliance piece from the state office. I realize there's things that you have to have here that we're accounted to statute. We're accountable for federal levels. We're accountable for all these things. But honestly, I've asked USB staff before, where is this in-state board rule that you're asking me to produce this? What are you going to do with it once you have it? Is it just that we've always had this form set out to look this way, and so we've been rolling out the same questions for a number of years? And if we can't give LEAs and charters the reason why we're asking for it, then maybe we need to stop asking if we don't need the information. I think sometimes in press, there's an intention to sound an alarm that we're not doing something, to make us look incompetent, to make us look like we're not doing our jobs. And when in reality, I think the best people that I've worked with in my profession are in the education profession, and they have an inherent right that they want to do it right. They'll do it right if they know what they have to do to hit that target.
Thank you, Chair. So Dr. Dalton, given your extensive experience in rural education, how would you scale your approach to effectively address the diverse challenges and needs of students in urban and suburban districts? So please provide some specific strategies or examples of how you would adapt your rural-based successes to these different environments and to benefit all public schools across the state.
Thank you for that question. They are different. Obviously, large districts are much different than rural districts, but we have commonalities too. We all teach kids. And if we have a successful program in Kane County School District, our concurrent enrollment has done phenomenally well, exponentially well. From 2016, we had 115 credits that they earned in one semester. If you fast forward to last fall of 2024, there were over 1,200 credits earned. We have that piece figured out. We can scale that across the state. I believe that starts with informing parents. Parents have to know what choices are available to their students. I believe that happens in 7th and 8th grade when they're in there with their college and career readiness, and we're trying to get them enrolled in classes and the classes they need to graduate high school. But if we can sit down with parents and students and say, if you want to enroll in this class as a 9th grader for concurrent enrollment, you can do that now in this business course. And then they have their T number for the university, or their U numbers, or their badger numbers, whatever. And then they're like, hey, I can do this. I can be successful in a concurrent enrollment class. When we provide those resources out, we find models that work, that have been successful. I think one role of the State Office of Education, or the State Board of Education would be to communicate that. How do we celebrate those successes? How do we help larger schools bring the universities to the table with concurrent enrollment? How do we build the spaces to make sure that when students walk in there, it's not just like a classroom. They have the pennants up, they have the banners up, they have their flags up. It's a cool place to be, right? We had a little space at Kanab High School that was not utilized. And Nancy Hauk from Utah Tech came to me. She says, I have $500,000 of Perkins money. Let's build a place where kids can come and enroll and engage in concurrent enrollment. I trusted her vision. She said, this wall's going here, this wall's going here, and I was like, great, let's do it. And then we started bringing in classes. We brought in classes from Utah Tech, SUU, Snow College. We have classes from Weber State. It's a central learning place. And it's the place to go if you want to do concurrent enrollment. And those kids learn that once they can be successful in that class, they can take other classes and they can be successful. They have the ability to walk on campuses and be successful. So that's just one example of scaling something from a small district that we can move to large districts, and maybe they have those in place. Maybe it's on the counseling pieces. Maybe that's where we're failing. And it's not all about concurrent enrollment either. We have industry recognized certificates where we've had great success with cosmetology, with welding, with CNA. You have to give students options. And once you get students options and they feel success, they will be engaged in our schools. Those kids, those students, have great attendance in the classes that they love. It's the classes that they struggle in that they really don't want to walk in the door. But they will go in and weather through whatever. If they don't like the math class, they'll weather through it so they can go to their welding class the next hour and work. So I think that we have to create opportunities where students feel they have decisions in their educational journey pathway. We also have to be clear on what that looks like as they move through the educational system so they can check the boxes to success. And then they know when they get to here, this is what they're going to get: the industry certificate, the general ed certificates, the associate degrees. Kanab High School tomorrow is going to graduate. 40% of their students will have general ed or associate degrees for that graduating class. We have to be in the top of the state for that. Everybody could do it. It's just getting the right people on board to help us achieve those goals.
Thanks, Chair. Dr. Dalton, my question is, many teachers are feeling like they aren't trusted. They are defeated and feel targeted by the legislature and even our board. How specifically, or can you give me an example of how you would protect our educators from the political vitriol and rhetoric as a state superintendent, and what would your message be to them to help them stay in the classroom?
I support teachers. I believe in teacher autonomy in their classroom. They need to know that we trust them. I know that those teachers are going to have the best interest of the students. And they get caught in the crossfire sometimes. They get caught in some political whirlwinds. They may have other entities that are pulling at them. They need to know that we have their back, that we support them with what they do, that the work that they're engaged in is important. I've had conversations with teachers recently in my district, and they said, do we have to really do this? We have to do this initiative. And I said, no. It's not required by statute. It's not required by state board rule. But if it helps you in your classroom and it can provide feedback for you, opt in. Be part of that process. But if it's not giving you the feedback you need to help you be a better instructor, to help you reach those learning goals that you have in your classroom, it's your choice. Teachers need us to run interference sometimes. They need someone to take the arrows for them because it's a hard job to teach. If you stand up every day and teach and deliver in the classroom, it's hard work. And those teachers love kids, and they want them to be successful. And when they get pulled in different directions, it makes it really difficult for them to focus on what's happening in the classroom. And they get caught up in all those things, and if they have questions, my door is always open. I've had teachers come in and said, this is happening in the legislature, why would they be looking at this? I'm like, it's not passed. You know, it's in committee. It's not final. We can continue to work on it. And I think that we have to send the message to our teachers that they are the most important part. If you look at John Hattie's research, he says one of the areas where you can have the largest impact on student learning is you look at teacher efficacy. Teachers believing that they have the resources they need, that they're engaged in a common cause, you give them the professional development, and that they can obtain their goals. That belief is what moves learning in the classroom. And so we need to look at the research too and make sure that we're providing teachers with what they need, let them know that we care about them, get out of their way and let them do their jobs. Thanks.
Volunteer stole my question, so I had to.
Is this a curve?
Rethink. And so now I'm going to ask when I really want to ask.
Oh, mercy.
I know. It's no secret that politics are now alive and well at the State Board of Education. And there are discussions and decisions that are made many times based on politics. I think that most board members would agree that former Superintendent Dixon, not quite former, superintendent has been masterful at navigating those political difficulties. But there are now political activities among State Board of Education members that are completely legitimate, but they've divided the board. And I wonder how if you can be as direct as possible in saying how would you navigate those political concerns and issues, given that we now have a politics in the State Board of Education room every day with us.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think first of all, regardless of what political party you ran on those tickets, we can be kind to each other. We can be tolerant of each other. We can be open to ideas. Even if your idea doesn't align with my idea, we need to be able to have open conversations and be respectful. We need to have that dignity piece where we respect each other for the people that you represent that voted you to represent them. I also believe that there are common threads regardless of whichever side of the aisle you're on. I would dare say that if we want what's best for children, I would say that doesn't matter which side you're on, we're going to say we're all in. I would also say that when board members are left out, it makes them feel like they are less than or voices may not be as important when everybody at the table must have equal voice. And the way you do that is collaborative conversation in open forums and be open to different ideas, because just because it's my idea, it may not be the best idea. And someone else may have other ways or other solutions. And you've heard this term before, but the smartest person in the room is the room. The room is important. The voices are important. Same as you, if you have parents who complain about things, they need to feel heard. And you, as state board members, you have that obligation and expectation to represent the people that elected you, regardless of the partisan piece. Must be extremely frustrating to be there. But I think that as a state superintendent, I could work on the goals of the board and bring everybody together with that common vision of, if you want it to be student success, if you want it to be resources for kids, if we're going to talk about food insecurities, whatever the board's priorities are, I think this room can come together and work collectively and collaboratively in the best interest of children, because our kids deserve it, our taxpayers expect it, and you're all very dedicated people. You guys endure long meetings. I've seen that. And so I think we can do it. I think it can happen. Thank you.
Dr. Dalton, what is the role of charter schools in public education, and what would you change about them, if anything at all?
The role of charter schools is really important because it allows parents to have choice. I don't believe that, one school may fit all students. And parents, state code, here I'm going to probably get in trouble, 53E2-201 states that parents have the right to decide what education they want for their children, public, private, or homeschool. I believe the choice is good because it raises the level for everybody. If you're the only person in town with the one, everybody's got to come through this door to get a high school diploma, it may not work for everyone. To your question about what would I change with charters, I don't know that world well enough. That would be a charter question that I'd have to ask them. Maybe it's nothing. It may be okay with the way it is. I don't have that expertise to say, I would go ahead and change this and this and this. But I will say, I have noticed by serving on the state board in the rules committee, many times the things that I'm pushing for from a rural district is the same as what some of the charters are pushing for. Less reporting requirements. How many mays and shalls are in the R277 rules? What reports am I going to have to produce for this? And so I would say, I won't speak for them, but for me, I'm like, we have a lot of things in common because in small districts, there's really nobody to pass the paper to. If that is a state board rule that's going to require a report, I'm the one that's going to have to fill it out. And then what are we going to do with the report? What's the state board going to do with that information once they receive it? I think that it helps students who may have a specific interest in one area that we may not be able to meet, in our schools. But I think it's good for them to have choice and opportunity because I think it raises the bar for all of us. Thanks.
Thank you. My question is, let's take an example that the board made a motion, approved something like a constitutional amendment or something on funding for schools or maybe flexibility in the system. How would you deliver that message to to the education community, superintendents? And maybe it's something you don't agree with, maybe it is, but how would you deliver that and how would you carry that out?
To the point that I may or may not agree, if the board passed it, that's what we're doing, right? That's the direction of the board. That's the will of the board. That's the role of the superintendent. You make decisions, you carry out the will of the board. So my opinion doesn't really matter at that point if the board wants it to be communicated. The way I'd communicate that out is I would start with those entities that are affected directly. I would like to communicate whatever, you guys have done a really good job at the communication piece as it comes out of the state office, but I'd let them have the information in how it's going to impact them, what's going to be changing, is it funding increasing, decreasing, what are the reporting requirements going to be from the state, and let everybody know up front, be open and transparent with the view of the board. The board wanted this because of X, right? This is why we did it. The why piece becomes very important as you move through this, because if you don't have the why, avoidant communication can lead to negativity. So if you say, hey, we're doing this as a board, this is how it is, like it or, just deal with it. But if you can explain what you're trying to accomplish as a board, I think you can get more people to buy into it and understand what you're trying to accomplish. I'd communicate out with the Utah School Superintendents Association. I have that connection there if it's going to be districts. I would communicate that out to charters. If there's going to impact them, I would also communicate that out to parents. Maybe there's homeschool parents or someone that wants to know what's happening at the state level. I don't think it has to be just privileged information. I think we have to be open and transparent with what we're doing with our communications. Thanks.
Hi, Dr. Dalton. Do you perceive USBE as having moved the academic needle in Utah? If so, what worked? If not, what would you change?
Okay. I guess my first question, maybe a follow-up, but what needle are we referring to? Are we talking end-of-level assessments? Or is it just general academics? Yes, you're going to, okay. Okay, so I'm going to say we haven't seen the gains that we'd like to see on end-of-level assessments. They're not where people want them to be. And so then once you don't end up where your goals are, you start to ask questions about where's it broken? How did it fall apart? And I will just say from my perspective, sometimes in public schools we feel like the finish line changes, the end of level test changes, the recalibration of questions. I feel like we're working, and then all of a sudden, where did this question come from? I taught the standards and objectives for the year, but where does this even fit? And so there's questions, I would say, possibly relating to the validity of what we're assessing. I will say an area that's been successful, Acadience reading, beginning of year, middle of year, end of year assessments. We know where those students are when they enter our school. We know where they are mid-year. We know where they are at the end. We can see that growth. I think something that the state office has done very well is the letters training for teachers to get that, it's almost like a minor, I would think, in reading, science of reading. It's intense. I haven't taken it, but I've talked to teachers and empathized with them as they went through that process. But at the end, I think their instruction is better. I've watched teachers engaged in those processes that came through, that training. So I think that has helped to raise the bar. So I'd say success has probably been in that, K3 piece for Acadience reading, and now the Acadience math, we're trying to track that as well. I would say that's been successful, but what we find within our district too is you may find an area that you'll really focus on. We want to bring up science this year. We're going to focus on 8th grade science. And typically what we see is 8th grade science goes up and then math goes down. We're like, what happened? We thought if we just maintained and taught the same things, we were going to hit these marks. But it seems like it's kind of a shifting tide to try to catch what that end of level assessment's going to be. I think something that contributes to that is student attendance, chronic absenteeism. If we don't have the students in front of us, it's really difficult to teach them. And so how we get those students engaged in our classrooms and want to walk into our doors and have those courses and extracurricular activities or those things that are meaningful to them to make them feel part of our schools, the more likely they're going to be successful in those end-of-level assessments. But those assessments are one piece. I think what's more important is what happens in the classroom, that a student knows that a teacher cares about them. That's never measured on a test. We don't measure on a test if a teacher's tied a student's shoes and comb their hair and brush their teeth to help them get ready to go to school in their classroom. You don't ever see that. But that student may struggle on a test. And we're like, how do we get them cut up? I think the humanistic thing that happens in the classroom that's not measured are also very important.
Dr. Dalton, my question is in two parts. The first part has to do with what would you identify as the chief barrier to academic excellence and student success? And as Utah's primary leader of learning, what steps would you take to encourage, invigorate, support, and promote rigor and excellence in classroom teaching?
Thank you for the question. The rigor and excellence in classroom teaching, that's something that our board has had as rigor, relevance, and relationships as their motto. We find that in order to do that, to increase that rigor, you have to offer courses that have the rigorous piece and also provide teachers with the professional development that they need to be able to reach that level. Some classes that I've taught, when I taught physics, I knew that if I walked in that classroom, I better be on my A game, because those students were not going to sit there and talk quietly amongst themselves. They were expecting me to bring my best to the table because they expected it. And I didn't want to let them down. We make sure that students are engaged, that they have the opportunity to collaborate. I think it's shifted a little bit in education where, even 20 years ago or so, the teacher may have been viewed as the authoritarian, the only one that knows the answers, and the teacher teaches this out of the book, and they're the only one. That's not how it is anymore. Teachers are facilitators with learning. And I see students who are on, math software, hitting the play button and recording it back and going back till they can figure it out. But success creates success. And when students can get into those classrooms and they can have that rigor and they know that they can do it, and that becomes an intrinsic motivation for them, they'll take the next class, and then they'll take the next class. The way we've increased rigor in our district has been with the concurrent enrollment piece, offering students opportunities to take the concurrent enrollment. And would you mind repeating the first part? Because I made some scratches on my paper and I can't read them. So I'm sorry. I got the last part.
What do you identify as the chief barrier to academic excellence and student success?
Chief barrier. I think that we need to make sure that we're meeting basic student needs when they come into our schools. By that I mean students need to have access to food. We do free breakfast in our district. If a student's going to get in a breakfast line, we're going to make sure they get it. I think we also, some other barriers that I think we have is students need to know when they walk in the door that there's someone in that school that cares about them. They're an advocate for them. Now that's not a barrier, that's removing a barrier. They have to feel part of our school. They need to be involved in music. You're in the music, I know. They have to be involved in the music, the extracurriculars. They have to find some place where they have a cohort and they can feel successful. And they are contributing something back to the school. That creates a culture of learning. And when you have students engaged in those activities, your academics will follow. We also need to inform our parents where our students are. I found that as we get parents to the table, we get the teacher at the table, we have the student at the table, there's like, okay, nowhere else to move. We've got tent pegs in all corners, let's get to work. But if we're passing blame about teacher did this or the parent did that, we don't pass blame. We take responsibility because students' educations matter. And we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can in our educational system to provide those opportunities of success for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Dr. Dalton.
Good afternoon.
My question is kind of manifold. So Utah has enthusiastically adopted the Prussian model of education, which has vocally and overtly been rejected by the voters of this state. What are the steps you will take to excise the elements of this model and return us to a system based on American ideals, excellence, merit, and tenacity?
Can you explain that a little more, please? I'm sorry. Or repeat it. I was listening to the first part. Could you clarify it for me? Sorry.
So the first part, it says, Utah has enthusiastically adopted the Prussian model of education, which has been vocally and overtly rejected by the voters of this state.
Is there something specific that you want me to address?
I would love to know how you're going to excise the elements of this model to return us to a system based on American ideals, excellence, merit, and tenacity.
Okay, don't know if I understand the question, but I'm going to give it a shot, okay? The merits of our system, are you talking about our country system?
I won't do that again, I promise. I'm speaking about a system based on merit. For example, we advanced based upon merit.
Okay.
Did that answer your question for clarity?
Are you talking merit pay?
No, I'm talking merit, academic merit.
Okay, academic merit. Oh, you're talking about moving students from one grade to the other based off of like competency education?
No.
Okay.
No.
Strike two.
I am speaking about a merit-based system. For example, we reward those, excuse me, I have a cough.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
We reward those who achieve, and the idea that everybody gets a medal is most definitely in contravention to the idea of merit, and it is embraced by the Prussian model of education, including many other factors. But does that answer your question for clarity?
Much better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the conversation. I want to swing one more time, see if this works, okay?
Yeah.
This concept of everyone gets a medal piece, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, right? So we feel like everybody needs something. But I feel like we're going to learn, we need to teach our students to have some grit, some resilience. It's not always going to be easy, but persistence can pay off. And as we do that and we put those pieces there to help them be successful, whether it's a school counselor, an advocate, coach. That's why I love sports as well, is because we know at the end of the game what the score is. We know who won and lost. There may not be a trophy every time for everybody. But if you work really hard and you're dedicated to that practice, you may still lose. But it's more about how do you take that to improve, and how do you use that to better yourself and people around you. But I think grit, in my opinion, has a greater determination on a student's academic success than sometimes maybe even the something number on an ACT. Because they will get in there, that's something that's not measured on the ACT, is their determination. And how hard they will get in there and work, and the part-time jobs that they'll keep as they go to college, and how do they do that. That consistent tenacity to get to their end result and not give up on their dreams builds character. And I think that's part of what our society needs, and it can help our students be successful. Thanks for entertaining my questions back and forth with the clarification. Thanks.
Thank you for your answers. We're almost there. So, my question, parents have the option of traditional public schools, charter schools, homeschool, private schools, online schools, and other educational opportunities. What do you see as your role for parents and students in helping them choose the option for their student?
We have to provide parents with information they need to make the best decision for their student. No one knows that student better than their parents. And so as we provide that information to them, I think we need to give them options as well. In our district, we have, parents who will do a hybrid homeschool. They'll come in for 2 periods, and they may want to take the music class, but they want to do homeschool for the other part of the day. And that's fine. We accommodate that, and we support them with what they need. To me, it's not about where the student receives the education, because that's the parents' call. To me, it's about how do we help them with the resources they need to make sure their student's successful. Because there's a pretty high possibility that they may come back into our school system. We've seen that in the past where they may be homeschooled up through 8th, grade or whatever, and then they want that high school diploma. Here, these students may come back in. They may not. But when they transfer back in, it helps everybody, including the student, if they have the resources if that they need to be successful. For example, we have homeschool parents who may want to have their student tested in Acadience reading. They want to know if what they're teaching at home is really has their student where they need to be, and they want to know how they compare in the state and across the country. We need to accommodate them by giving them that assessment so that they can test their own student and give them the information they need and answer their questions, because the more they're informed, the more likely they're going to make the best decision. It's the lack of information that makes it difficult. Parents saying, if I would have known that, I would have never chose this, or I would have never went here, but I just didn't have the information at the time. So empower people with information, allow them to choose what would be in the best interest of their student.
All right, Dr. Dalton, your primary role is technically going to be a CEO of nearly 400 employees. Can you share an example how you would positively recognize employees, motivate them, and also how you deal with employees who may not be fulfilling their responsibilities?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think the key to that is, I love the book Good to Great, Collins' book. He says you got to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, get the correct people in the right seats. Sometimes people may not be in the right seats. They may have applied for a job that they wanted, but they have a real skill set over here. So how do you find what that skill set is, and how do you help them be successful in their career? I think that as you do that, you have to understand people's strengths. Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. But I believe in capitalizing on strengths. Take people's strengths and make them stronger. And when you do that, you can have success and they feel successful in their jobs. The other piece is, if they don't feel successful where they're at, how do you help them transition to where they can be successful? It may not be in the organization. It may be another career pathway. But how can you help them achieve that success? And they also have to be heard. I think that employees, sometimes they have they're thinking about a better way to build a mousetrap or whatever that may be. They're trying to find a better way to solve a process. They have to have a way to be innovative and to find out what those best practices are. That's pretty typical in computer science or IT world. They allow flexibility within their schedule to improve processes and take that feedback from people, because the person that knows what may be the best way to take care of that or address that issue are the ones that are working on it. And then you remove the barriers that may be in their place, but you also empower them with the tools and resources they need. But they have to feel heard, and they need to feel valued, and they need to know that we support them, because that many employees, it's going to take everyone to move the needle on board goals. And these are the people that we're going to count on to help us get there. So I really think that that's something we can do. My door is always open. I would keep it open for 400 employees as long as they don't all come at the same time. But I would keep my door open because I want people to come and talk to me. And if they have concerns, express them. And then how do we resolve their issues? And sometimes it's just open communication and to feel value and heard, and then let them know that we care about them as individuals.
Thank you, Dr. Dalton. If it's okay with the board, and again, I'll explain this to you, Dr. Dalton, my question I am going to reserve for the last 5 minutes of this interview, or the last question at the very least, and it's simply, is there anything else that you would like this board to know before we close this interview? Or if there was a question that you would like to offer clarity on, that you would be able to do that. So we will move that question to the end, but I am going to open it up for questions from board members in the order in which they are on this tablet screen right here. So we will begin. The first three we have are Member Bogus, Member Earl, and Member Carey. Member Bogus.
I'm going to do better this time.
I'm sorry.
just joking. So there was a 2022 legislative audit that found that the Utah education system, including this agency, has, and I'm quoting, a culture of non-compliance. This conclusion and assertion continue to surface in subsequent audits and evaluations. Do you believe that current resources are being used effectively to enforce compliance with the law? And secondly, what concrete actions will you take to review, reform, and hold both individuals or agencies accountable for persistently ignoring legal and regulatory requirements?
Okay. Thank you. Non-compliance, when I think about that, as I read what comes out of the state office, if it's something that is non-compliant or something that's flagged, I want to know specifically what wasn't done correctly. And it cannot be a broad statement like misuse of public funds, misuse of federal funds. Well, what was misused? Where did it happen? You've got to drill down to the level to say, okay, this was restricted money and it should not have been used here. And I would communicate that back to the districts and say, this is the finding, because districts would do the corrective training that they need to make sure that doesn't happen again. But when it's broad brushstrokes about, we're way up here saying you didn't do this right, well, what did we not do right? Help me correct it. And that's part of what the role of the state office could be, is to be a resource to come in and say, you need to code this correctly, or this expenditure is in the wrong place. I'm just tackling it from some financial pieces. But if there are things that are egregious, that have been warned, and we've done the training, and we've done everything we can as a board, there's a time where you have to draw the line in the sand and say, okay, we're going to hold the funding, that's typically what it is, until this, and this are completed. I hope we don't ever get to that point, because it should be preventative. If we're communicating what's wrong clearly, we have our goals specific, and we've done the training with how it needs to be, I believe people will do it in the right way. But if they're intentionally not, We support them with the resources, and if they don't do it, then we would have to do some type of corrective action, which may be holding funding, whatever the board would have the legalities to do according to your state board rules or state code. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got member Earl, Carey, and Green. So member Earl.
Am I on? Okay. So, so my question centers around the day-to-day engagement with staff. So it'd be tell me about the day-to-day engagement that would be going on at USBE, and specifically maybe those structures or those the efficiency or the effectiveness of the departments. And I'm just going to share an example. Sometimes I've heard, well, actually I've had calls from my districts where they've called and gotten different information on the same topic. So I'm just wondering, what is it you are going to do? What does that day-to-day look like that creates that efficiency and effectiveness?
Yeah, first, I would need to figure out how it's structured, the departments. What does that hierarchy look like, if that's the correct term? But inside of that department, if there's things that are coming out of there that are not correct, that needs to be corrected within. But USBE is accountable for what goes out, right? So if I got a call from a superintendent, they said, we had this, and I've had this happen to me with like codes for attendance, for example. We had one person in USB said, you need to do this for an exit code, and we called someone else, they said, you need to use this exit code. So which one is right? I think if you can identify and define what those internal procedural processes look like and be specific with, and we've done this in our district. We had a principal come in and we've worked on these procedural processes, because when people don't do what you want them to do, that's not on them, that's on the leadership. This is a extreme ownership, an extreme ownership book. He talks about no bad teams, only bad leaders. I would talk to the leaders of that team and say, why are they saying this? And what are your internal procedural processes to make sure that this is what you do before we start? What do we do during? This is what it looks like when it's happening. And then when it's completed, this is what it looks like. And it must be simple. It has to be easy to follow. The more complex that is, the less likely it'll be for people to hit those targets. So clear expectations, and I would communicate it back to those department chairs or heads or whoever that may be, to make sure that they have their internal procedural processes specific. And it may not even be in that one department. It may be this department and another one. And I talked last night about being siloed. And we need to have opportunities to collaborate with what our end goal is and make sure that we're communicating the same thing out, because it makes us look bad when we don't, right? Nobody wants that. And I don't think employees intentionally want to do that. It's just they don't have the training or the information they may need to give the correct information. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got member Carey, Green, and Booth. Member Carey.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, Dr. Dalton, it's estimated that the state spends about $8 billion a year on public education. And would you agree that it's a fair statement that when you spend that kind of money, we're looking for particular outcomes? Would you agree with that?
100%.
So in your opinion, and I'm going back to your answer to the question about academic excellence and food, and this is a two-part question, but my question is, in your opinion, what is the primary purpose of public education? And then I have one other question, Chair, after that. No, I don't have any more questions after that. I have one question. What is the primary purpose of? Okay, I'll defer. Just that one question then. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, kind of.
The purpose of education, in my view, education is the great equalizer. It gives students opportunities to be able to achieve things that they never thought were possible. I believe that it is an inalienable right for students to have literacy, to be able to read and write. I want all students reading at or above grade level in third grade. We know that is a key indicator. If they're behind in third grade, it's very unlikely that they will ever reach their peers. That's what I did my doctoral thesis on. I studied the students in our own district. I tracked them all the way through. The kids that were behind in third grade were behind in eighth grade. They were behind on the ACT. They were less likely to graduate. That's hard conversations for parents because they think if we work really hard to get our kids caught up in third grade, sometimes we do, but most of the time, if we can't hit that third grade mark, that's a key thing for me. But I believe public education allows equal opportunity to literacy and basic learning opportunities for all students. And in those schools that may have Title I schools or additional support schools, we need to throw everything we can, funding-wise, staff-wise, attract and retain the best teachers because those kids deserve it. All students deserve it. And we can do that in the state of Utah. Thank you.
Follow up for clarity? No, sir. Okay. Next, I've got Member Green, Booth, then Davis. So Member Green.
Okay. This is maybe a little along the same lines. Actually, to Member Carey's question, how do you distinguish between fleeting educational trends and meaningful innovation? And how would you ensure that the direction we take as a state remains rooted in long-term integrity and purpose? And if I may offer just a quick example about reading, we veered off into a specific lane of how to teach reading. What we are finding is we're reverting back to what was because we know it works.
Yeah.
So that's the example. And then my fear is putting a shiny gold sticker and repackaging the old trend that we didn't, it's maintaining integrity in what we're doing. So distinguish between fleeting educational trends and meaningful innovation and ensuring that the direction we take as a state remains rooted in long-term integrity and purpose.
Meaningful education, that's kind of a fine line to balance sometimes. And if you ask veteran teachers, like, just wait, what we're teaching now, we'll be teaching it again in 10 years because it's going to come back around. So this reading program you have today, I'm just going to put it on the shelf because in 10 years we're going to be teaching the same thing under a different publisher, right? Is that what your question is? I think we need to make sure that what we're doing is based in research, not research from the publishers, but research in reading and learning. People who can give us the information that we need to provide those information and tools to our teachers. This is what I found in education. I know what the end goal should be, and I know what I'd like that for those students where those students may need to be in reading, for example. I can ask 3 teachers in the same school who have all been through the same training how they're going to teach it, and their path may be different all the way through. It doesn't matter to me what that path looks like as long as they hit the goal. If they don't hit the goal where those students need to be, then I'm going to start trying to help them with their professional development. The other piece is we need to be careful how we roll things out. At a state level, if you're going to say, hey, we're going to bring this statewide initiative, well, has it been beta tested somewhere? Have we seen the results? Do we know that it's really going to work? There are times in our district where we're like, let's do this. Let's just start in one school. Let's get it fine-tuned to be working here. And then when we roll it out, it's going to work much better across the district. If we do a blanket thing across the state, sometimes that's really bumpy. But if we can work out those things that may be difficult for us and make sure we have a smooth product that's tested to be able to deliver the results that we'd like at the state level, and we can say, this school did it, this school did it. Then you know what teachers do? They call that teacher and say, did this really work? Did you get these gains? Because teachers will trust teachers. I can go in there if you're going there as a state and say, this works the best, they're going to believe each other. And they want to know that what they're doing is going to produce a better result. If the new thing produces a better result, they'll buy into it. Or if it saves them time, they will buy into it. But it's about student achievement. And so I think you start slow and it's small and you perfect that and then you roll it out rather than a total statewide initiative.
We've got next in line Member Booth, Davis, and Wood. Member Booth.
Dr. Dalton, from your perspective and experience, what is the greatest financial need for Utah's public education?
Greatest financial need. I'm going to just start from the legislative level. We need additional funding in the WPU to allow districts to have the autonomy to put that money in the areas that they feel like would be most beneficial for their districts. We need above the line funding items from the legislature so that we know that that money is ongoing. When one-time money comes in, it's great, but we don't know if it's going to be sustainable over a long period of time. We need to make sure that we are paying our teachers competitive salaries. That's how we show our value to our employees and our classified staff. We show them by the compensation that they receive. We have to be competitive in that space because we want to attract and retain the best for our students. I think that we also need to leverage funding from different sources. There's money out there sometimes from, I was talking last night in the town hall meeting about federal money that we reserve. And somebody's like, well, we don't want to deal with federal money. Well, sometimes there's a lot of money there. And if we can pull that money in and make it successful and utilize it for the projects that we have in place, other taxing entities, counties, cities, once people see a vision and they buy into that, people want to contribute to it because it's going to be successful. Everybody wants students to be successful. So that the greatest financial need, I would say, is I would love to see it in the WPU, but the hard thing with that is the accountability piece. We get money that comes from the legislature, but many times it's restricted to a specific line item. You get this for this specific item, and then we have this report. We have to trust that when we give money to LEAs and charters that it's going into the right areas and that the deliverables are going to be student achievement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next three, we have Davis, Wood, and Kelly. Member Davis.
Yes, and just for situational awareness, I'm going to just, for the public, we've heard a lot about audits today, and I just want the public to understand, too, that some of these audits we actually requested, noting areas of risk, and so it's not like, surprise, you haven't done a good job. Like, some of these we have known for a while that we needed to take a closer look at. But here's the question.
Okay.
Sometimes there are indications of our needing to provide like efficiencies in the future as to the operations of our agency or office. What does that mean to you? Do you feel that the board or the agency has all of its critical FTEs to provide support to the LEAs, or are we too big?
That's not a loaded question at all. I need to adjust. I would need to see the staff. I don't know everyone's roles in the building, right? One thing that I use as a pulse to determine if a staff is too large or too small is workload, typically. What are we doing? What are we able to work on? The other piece is, what can you provide in raises? If you have overstaff, that may be one of the indicators that you can't give the raise that you need to be competitive with the rest of the market. If you keep it in balance, your revenues with the staff, then I think that you could increase those raises to attract and retain the highest qualified individuals for the profession. I've seen very qualified people who have been in a profession who may be here and leave, and it may take 2 or 3 people to be hired behind them to maybe try to pick up those pieces. So in my view, it's advantageous to give those people who are doing the work, that have the value, higher compensation, because when someone leaves, then you're retraining and you're like back to square one, trying to, pick things up, and it takes time for everybody to learn the skill set. But to say whether you're overstaffed here at USBE, I don't know that. I mean, we could count the parking spots out there and see. I've heard the parking is kind of tough out here, but I don't know. But I think that that's something that I would need to analyze, but it may be something that would need to be addressed, because I think the compensation and raises from USB maybe haven't been to the same level as other districts. And so there may be some imbalance there.
Thank you. We've got Wood, Kelly, and Bogus. Vice Chair Wood.
This is kind of a personal question, but you've been Minersville, Beaver, Kanab, Garfield. How do you see yourself settling into being here in the office? How do you see that, a big adjustment in your life, kind of the small town boy? I say that because that's where my family is, down in Beaver, so.
You know, I'll take that title anytime, small town. It is different, even just the last 4 days being in the city. It's been a little different. It's a little noisy here. Like, you know, it seems like it's always going. I could adapt and adjust to that. It would be a change for me and my wife as well. But we're at a place in our life where I think that we have the ability to do that, to be here and be accessible. But it's a change, and whenever there's a change, there's uncertainty. And one of my friends told me once, you have to get out of your comfort zone to grow. I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone in the city, but I think I can navigate it and work through it.
Thank you. We've got Kelly, Bogus, and Green. Member Kelly.
Thanks again for your time. Appreciate it. What processes will you as superintendent implement to ensure staff presents to the board thorough and accurate information to ensure the board has the best opportunity to make the best decisions for students?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. It's essential that the board has the information you need that is accurate, because you're taking all that information to vote on a decision. And if you're not getting that, it's an injustice to the board and it puts you in a difficult position. So I would start with those individual departments with what those deliverables need to look like. What specific things would you like to see from the board that the state superintendent could provide back to you? I would lean on the expertise of the people in those departments to make sure that they're looking at those things before they come to the board. And if they're not, if the quality is not there, the information is not there, we have to have a private conversation about what's expected. I believe in publicly praising and privately critiquing. It doesn't help anybody say, can't believe this report's not right. I don't know how it ended up here in front of the board. But if we need to have a conversation, that's why we have offices with doors on them, so we can say, look, this has to be done. This is not acceptable. And we can't put this type of information in front of the board again. Once we set that expectation of what the final product looks like, the more likely it will be for them to hit that target. And if they're not doing it, we adjust staff so that we get the right people in the places to give us the information that we need.
Member Bogus.
I know. I know you're excited. You're just so stoked. And I do appreciate the witty repartee. Thank you. Given that government education is funded, structured, and regulated by the government, and recognizing that Utah operates as a constitutional republic, how do you personally view the role of a board member within this framework? Do you believe that it is our role to represent the interests of the government to the people, or the people to the government? In short, is it our role to advance the system or to advance the voice of the people?
I'm going to say yes. No, but I do think that it is important, because you have to balance that as a board member, right? You represent the voice of the people because they elected you, and you have that obligation to be their voice here at this table. But I think it can be a yes and. The voice of the people is important. That's what our whole system is based on. And if people don't think we're doing a good job, then they vote us out and someone else is in that seat, right? But the will of the people is also an expectation that's placed in our society with deliverables and outcomes. And if we're not hitting them, then I think we're failing with the voice of the people. I think they are tied, because the voice of the people, I would say, they want certain things to happen at the state level. They want opportunities for their students. And I think you could do both, but that would be depending on your judgment as a board member with what line that may need to be. Sorry if that was too political. I didn't know how to answer your question.
Member Green.
I appreciate I get one more question. It's something that I've heard you say before, you said again today, and it's keep it simple. I know it with one more S. Have you kiss it, right? Keep it simple, stupid. But you kept it to the one. So my question here is, how would you ensure that state required reporting from teachers and LEAs is meaningful, streamlined, and not overly burdensome, while still meeting accountability and transparency standards?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. I sat on a committee with Representative Pulsifer a few years ago to reduce reporting requirements at this agency because I felt like it was too burdensome. And I was asking questions in the districts like, what do you need this information for? Is it tied to statute or state board rule? And then what are you going to do with it once you receive it? If it's just going to go in a file or it's going to be saved on your computer and you're going to check the box that Kane School District had submitted the application, then we probably don't need it. Unless it's something that has to be done tied to statute or code. So if there's a report that's going out, I would like to see it as a state superintendent. I would ask that department, what is required for us to report back for the transparency piece, for the state board rule, or for the statutory requirement? What are we required to report back to the legislature? It's this one, remove this. This has just been here for 10 years and everybody's asking, we don't need it anymore, take it out. And then we let people know ahead of time what report's going to be coming. It feels like, from the district side anyway, I'm waiting for something to come from the state office to say, you have this report, and then I'm like, okay, where do I have to go pull this information from and put it on this paper to send back to you? It's like I'm always kind of like on a defensive rather than a proactive approach. I think if we had the calendar thing that I referenced and we knew what that reporting piece looked like, we could plan way ahead. An example of that might be, I'm not trying to be critical on processes here, but we usually get a request from the state office on school fees. It comes to schools in August, September. So we're like, we have this. We've done all the registration and everything. The last time I did that report, I submitted the wrong report because they wanted the school fees from the prior year, not the ones we'd just done in August. I'm like, I know where they are this year. Now I'm banking this information until that report comes out for next year. So timing is also really important with when we ask that. If we can align that with what's happening in schools, like the school fee report, students come in to register August, September, that's when the school fee report should come out, and that's when it should align to the year that we're asking for it.
Member Brinton.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Hart, Dr. Dalton. Another question I have is, how much control do you feel the state school board should have over the administrators who are working for them?
Specifically, which administrators?
Well, I would say staff and administrators in, I would say at USBE, over the superintendent.
This is how I work staffing questions or concepts in our district, okay? The control piece is, I think that should go through the superintendent to address whatever deficiencies there may be. And I tell my board, if it's serious enough, it will be in front of you as a board. Let me try to resolve it at the lowest level. Let me try to fix whatever needs to be adjusted there. Let's do whatever corrective action we need to. But if there's some serious infraction, it's a violation of state code, it's a violation of policy, then it will probably be in front of you as a board to take action. And you'll be in the middle of it at that point. But let us try to resolve it at the lowest level. So I would say let administrators do the work. Let the supervisors do the work so that they can oversee and supervise the people within their individual areas. And we set that expectation and make it clear so they understand what those outcomes would be. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's my turn. Well, I don't see any lights. I'm not reading minds here.
Just made my stomach roll a little bit.
Dr. Dalton,
Yes.
is there anything else that you would like this board to know before we close this interview? Or is there any question that was asked that you somehow would like to clarify and answer?
No, I would just like the board to know that I want what's the best interest of students. I have a relentless pursuit to provide opportunities for students. And I want to do everything in my power to make sure students are successful. Because for some students, most students, it's the best chance they have. And I've learned that when you get the right people around the table, you get the people who have the ability to make policy, the people to allocate funding, the people to be solutions, problem solvers, resources at the table. And if you're signing MOUs, memorandums of understanding, or whatever you have to do, good things happen for students. If you can't get the key stakeholders around the table to do what needs to be done, it's like a dream. This is where we'd like to be in 5 years, but you can't ever get there because you have these obstacles in front of you. And when you get a common mission, vision, and goal from the State Board of Education, and you get everybody working towards those goals, they can be accomplished. As long as we are specific and direct with what we're trying to accomplish and what we're majoring, because what we're finding as a priority, because what we're doing is we're putting every resource, staff, time, money towards achieving those goals. And then when it happens, we're like, why didn't we do this 5 years ago? This is where we want to be. What's the next thing? And then what's the next thing? You have to get everybody to the table. Those collaborative conversations are essential because this is too heavy of a lift for anyone to do it on their own. It's going to take everybody, but our kids are worth it and they deserve it. And I'm an advocate for students and I will do anything I can to help them be successful. And that's why we're in the business. We're here to help kids. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Dalton, for your time over these last couple of stressful days, weeks, months. Yeah, it's been a minute. So we appreciate your time. At this point, if you want to step out with Dakota Cambruzzi, she'll give you some more information. Board members, let's thank you again, Dr. Dalton, for your time. Sure.
This is something that a principal brought into our district. And you saw it in my slides last night, the 7 that interviewed me with the screening. It just basically says, we's greater than me. That's what I was just speaking to. And I like the tone that says USBE, where we is greater than me, because it takes everybody. So I'm going to leave these cards. And I also have some thank you cards for everybody who has been part of this process. Dakota, I should have brought you one. I'm sorry, but you did a great job too. This is for board members, but I just want to express my appreciation to the board for allowing me the opportunity to share my educational vision with the state of Utah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Board members, let's move into, at this point, move into executive session. Once we vote to go into or not go into executive session, depending on the votes, then we will break as they set that up. So I am seeking a motion that the board go into executive session for the purpose of discussing the character, professional competence, and pending or reasonably imminent litigation, also for the purpose of discussion regarding the deployment of security personnel, devices, or systems.
So moved.
Second.
We have a so moved and a second. Let's go ahead and take a roll call vote. Member Bogus.
Yes.
Member Bollinger. Yes. Member Booth.
Yes.
Member Brinton. Yes. Member Davis.
Yes.
Member Earl. Yes. Member Green.
Yes.
Member Hall. I'm yes. Member Wood.
Yes.
Member Carey.
Yes.
Member Lear. Yes. Member Reel. Yes. Member Kelly. Yes. Board members, can we meet here at 6 o'clock? And by the way, that passes unanimously. Thank you. 6 o'clock. Let's plan to be here.
Recording in progress.
Board members, welcome back. We are seeking a vote to come out of closed session. Thank you. Let's do no roll call vote?
Yes, sorry, I thought your mic wasn't on.
It is on. Let's do a roll call vote. Member Bogus. We're not on. I was tricked. Okay. Okay, we're on YouTube. I don't know if the motion was caught, so once again, I'm seeking a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
Thank you. Okay. Let's do a roll call vote. Member Bogus?
Yes.
Member Bollinger? Here. Member Booth?
Yes.
Member Brinton? Here. Member Davis? Yes. Member Earl? Yes. Member Green? Yes. Member Hall? Yes. I'm a yes. Vice Chair Wood?
Yes.
Member Carey? Yes. Member Lear? Yes. Member Reel? Yes. Member Kelly? Yes. Thank you. We are back in our open meeting. I'm going to turn time over to Member Carey.
Thank you, Chair. I have a motion. Does that need to be seconded?
Do we hear the motion? Let's hear the motion.
Yeah, it also needs to be read apparently, so that, okay. Sorry. I'm going to make a motion that the board appoint Dr. Molly Hart to be the State Superintendent of Public Instruction for the Utah State Board of Education.
We have a motion and a second, and the motion again is to appoint Dr. Molly Hart as the State Superintendent for the Utah State Board of Education. Let's go ahead and vote. Thank you, board members. That passes 12 in favor, 2 in opposition. Those in opposition being Member Bogus and Member Green. I would seek one final motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passed unanimously. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Recording stopped.